would definitely stand out and make the right move. Many years ago, we didn't have a shopping center, so they built a Publix. So we got a Publix, we have a brewery, and that stretch right there will be, well, it's got to be very nice because if you think about it, it's like the key to Jacksonville Beach when you first come in, one of the first areas you see. So we're for the project. We think that would be a very good asset to us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Willie McLaren. Willie, if you come forward, give us your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes, sir.
My name is Willie McLaurin. I reside at 102 South 11th Street. However, my church is on 125 South 9th Street. At first, when I received the information about this, it was kind of some misinformation that was being put out because members of our community and of our church had been told it was going to be a lounge put there and a nightclub and stuff. And then after talking with Ty and those guys, I found out different. So I'm in support of that. We cannot continue to hold current and upcoming businesses accountable for what took place in the past. It's time to move on to increase progress. I'm sure we would seen parking and stuff, but that's something that no matter where you at around this beach, you're going to deal with parking and stuff. However, they not only would there be a microbrewery, but they have a publishing company and a coffee shop. Now, I took the time to go to Green Tea just to see what kind of microbrewery they had, and they're going to have a smaller one. And so I thought, okay, well then this may not cause as many problems as everybody wanted it to be. So I'm in support of them establishing their business there on Sutter Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Appreciate it. Aaron Meisenheimer. Aaron, if you come forward, give us your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Aaron Meisenheimer, 102 6th Avenue North. I'd like to start off by thanking the City Council, Mayor Latham, city staff. This is some part of the applicant company, and this is my company's first time going through anything like this. Everyone's been very helpful, and we truly appreciate it. Looking back over the last 4 months, we've certainly learned a lot about the process and we've grown as a company. Just want to talk a little about our past. So we've had, I'll keep it short. We've had our offices at beaches for the past 10 years, and we have strived to be good, caring neighbors while having had a positive impact on our surrounding neighborhood. Our track record speaks for itself. We can only hope that we continue this trend on Sutter Avenue by being proactive neighbors and working hard to make surrounding community a better place for all. We look forward to working with Samuel and Toy and others we've met at the Carver Center that are doing great things for our community. We look forward to helping our immediate neighbor and new friend, Pastor Austin, although we may not agree on everything. We hope to be a good neighbor. Continue doing his good work with the church. We want to help keep the streets safe for the people in the community. We look forward to working with our neighbors in the city to improve the traffic situation, which I know is a big issue in the area as well, to ensure everyone's safety, including our staff and guests. So the process obviously has taken a little longer than expected. I just want to reiterate what Ty said about the timeliness of the decision tonight. We need a resolution. The seller has already been gracious enough to grant us an extension on our purchase sale agreement to make it through this meeting. But we can't expect them to hold the door open any longer. We have $15,000 committed to this deal at the moment, not including the survey, application fees, the list goes on. If approved, we're going to commit to over $500,000 in renovations and improvements to the space on Sutter Avenue. Just please help us achieve our goal. Please help us keep all of our business at Jacksonville Beach for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Aaron. Scott Wiley. Scott, if you come forward, give us your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes, sir. Scott's gone? Okay. Okay, at this time I'm going to close the public hearing, and before requesting a motion on the ordinance, beginning with myself, Each of the members is requested to indicate for the record both the names and persons and the substance of any ex parte communication regarding this application. An ex parte communication refers to any meeting or discussion with a person or citizen who may have an interest in the decision which occurred outside the public hearing process. I'm going to start by saying that I've received another letter from Ty in pretty good detail. In a couple minutes, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that letter. But I also held a town hall meeting in the Carver Center. Gosh, what was it, 2 nights ago? I don't even remember. I have to apologize. Like the gentleman in the back, I've got about half of my mental capability and a quarter of my voice. But I did hold a town hall meeting. We talked about several things, but this topic came up as well. And, you know, I feel I have an obligation as mayor to make sure that everybody understands what's coming through the pipeline, and that was the intent of addressing that at the town hall meeting. So, starting out at the end with Mr. Nichols. Anybody else?
I've also spoken with Ty again, just saying that they were going to continue forward with this process, and that was the limit of our conversation.
Thanks, sir.
I received an email from Ty. I did not reply. It never hit send.
I received the same email from Ty, had some communication with Ty about the new language and making sure that that was something that fit within their business paradigm, and that was about it.
Thank you, sir.
I also received an email from Ty and spoke with him this afternoon about basically the contents of that email.
I received my same weekly email from Ty, which, that's fine, it's great, it's good to hear from you. And it was basically going over the previous meeting and if I had any questions or concerns, and that was it.
I received the same email from Ty. He called and left a message, but I wasn't able to return his call today. But I also had a call from Terry DeLoach, and then we also spoke recently after Mayor Flan Sharp's memorial service a little bit about the project as well. And that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, at this time, I'll be seeking a motion to approve the ordinance as read by title.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 2019-8115 as amended to modify the definition of microbrewery to include a tasting room and to add a definition for tasting room to Article 4, definitions, Section 34-41 of the Jacksonville Beach Land Development Code.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Before opening the floor to discussion or questions by the council, please be reminded that our decision will be based on the criteria set forth in the Land Development Code, staff's report, the recommendation of the Planning Commission, and the public input at all hearings. This time I'm going to open the floor to discussion. And Ms. Golding, I believe you had the key first.
I did some research because I wanted to familiarize myself a little bit more with tasting rooms and what's being done these days, and microbreweries. And I found that Florida has several places that have passed legislation. Tampa, of course, has a lot of microbreweries. I found a lot there, and they, of course, included some things in their ordinances. Dunedin also mentioned that, kind of like what we're talking about with the microbrewery definition, may or may not offer tastings, may or may not provide on-site sale and consumption of products. Islamorada has, in their microbrewery definition, may include a tasting room and retail space for patrons on site. And they also specify a maximum of 30% of the non-residential floor area, so I'm not sure, some of them may have residences involved. That's kind of interesting. But a maximum of 30% may be designated as a tasting room and retail space. Cape Canaveral also has some microbreweries there. West Palm Beach has a West Palm brewery, and their microbrewery definition included tasting rooms as well. And they also mentioned at least 65% of the square footage of the facility inclusive of outdoor seating, shall be dedicated to the brewery. So I wanted to share that with everyone because I think it kind of supports, you know, this is not about their project per se. This is about our land development code and what we're putting into our land development code. And just for some additional information, our C1, C2, and CBD are the districts that currently allow microbreweries. And so, of course, we're talking about allowing it in the CS district, which is a very, very small district. But I just wanted to share this with everybody because I think that this just supports the direction that we're going in. And I feel more comfortable about supporting it.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Dumont.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with supporting it and the land development code, but I want the definition to be narrowed. I did some research as well. I went, a lot of phone calls, lots of, put that one aside. So the first thing I did was, the last meeting that we had there was a discrepancy between the tasting room and the tap room and what they were really originally asking for. So I went back and listened through all of the meetings. Their first meeting in November with the Planning Commission, and then the 2 meetings with us, and then another one with the Planning Commission, and then the last one with us. And for the longest time, Mr. Wallace first used the word tasting room, and I think what we really have here is the semantics of words. Tasting room versus tap room. So Mr. Wallace, when he was in front of the City Council the first time, said it was a tasting room. And then we started talking about a tap room. It was the second meeting, though, that was really clear that we didn't have a distinction between the two, and we were talking about them interchangeably. There's the tap room and tasting room we used interchangeably throughout the meeting. I have the who said what. We started with Bill using the word tap room, the city attorney using the word tasting room. The whole time, we all have the same thing in our mind. Also at that meeting, Mr. Wallace also noted events with other breweries and such. I can go through this whole long list of who said what, but I really don't want to. Is that okay if I don't go through the whole list? All right, thank you. I'm going to turn the page then. So the main point is this definition that we're looking at here. It can be corrected relatively easily if we were to amend microbrewery to say tap room instead of tasting room. And then the definition of tap room, this is my second concern, then it would be a definition of tap room. When we amended it at the last meeting, we just said beer and wine. When we look at how we define a microbrewery, we have no minimum. I can't wait until tomorrow and get these Invisalign things off. I won't be talking so funny. So bear with me. So we don't have a minimum amount that they can brew. So you could just go in and start a little tiny brew thing and still pass off in this district as a brewery, a microbrewery, like a small one, but still just put PBR on tap for $1, and that's really not what we are envisioning up here. But that would be allowable with how this is with just saying beer. However, the Brewers Association, who knew? The Brewers Association has defined microbreweries and tap rooms, and they have a whole bunch of criteria and sizes. Microbrewery is a very small tap room with annual output of less than 15,000 barrels. 1 barrel equals 2 kegs, by the way. With less than 15,000 barrels annually. So this way we'd be able to narrow down what would be sold in there. It's more expensive beer. And to think about the size, I contacted Ben Davis over at Intuition, and I asked him about, because Intuition, you think of that as like a really big microbrewery. They're still a small microbrewery. Their output is 10,000 barrels of beer annually. So they're still smaller than that small thing. So if we could amend beer and wine to say beer brewed by microbreweries that produce less than 15,000 barrels of beer annually and wine on site, would clean that up to close up that loophole and change the tasting room to tap room to clarify the confusion in that. And the reason why I'm saying all of this is if you look at this memo on the bottom of the first page, the charge of the Planning Commission and the staff was to satisfy both the requests of the applicant, being Mr. Wallace, and the concerns of the city. And that would address his concerns with being a microbrewery that can serve on premises, not only what he brews, but other microbrews as well. And to make sure that it is microbrews, to make sure that you have that definition of the size of the output of the brewery with the tap room. And just to clarify with Ms. May's concern about using a tasting room that has a common understanding of what it is, change tasting room to tap room. I'm done.
Are
Can I do a
you,
motion?
are you seeking a motion?
I never know if you guys want, I can make the motion. I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to change the word tasting room to tap room in the definition of microbrewery. And then in the definition of tasting room, change tasting to tap. Where it says beer and wine, after the beer, put brewed by microbreweries that produce less than 15,000 barrels of beer annually and wine on site. Comma after the annually, so you don't, the brewery doesn't have to brew the wine on site. That's
Okay.
my amendment.
Got a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, seems like your motion died, so thank you.
Okay.
Mr., did you have something else?
No, I just wouldn't support this without that restriction in there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vogelsong?
I think we've done a pretty great job in limiting what a microbrewery can do within this particular zone and addressing all the concerns from meeting one. In a sense, I think we've micromanaged the heck out of this, in my mind, to add those definitions to try to prevent them from putting Miller Lite on tap. I think it just seems to be a go above and beyond to control their product. That definitely is where I have a problem. So I think we addressed the liquor issue, which I'm happy with. We addressed the times, which is 10 p.m. and midnight, to address the late night crowds and issues as far as the church was concerned. And then we addressed the square footage in making sure that this tasting room is a small area, so it can't become a bar. Even if they had dollar PBRs, we're talking about such a small area that it's not something that can get out of control. So I'm happy with the definition. I'm happy with as far as we've come. The only question that I would have, and Bill, this might be directed to you, I just want to make sure that this, the deletion format in the first part of our memo on page 2 doesn't include all the language in the bottom of the form. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that we're voting on the tasting room definition at the bottom and not the tasting room definition in the middle of the page, because there's some things left out of that.
Yes, sir. Bill Meehan, Planning Director, 11 North 3rd Street. You are correct. You are voting on the bottom definition. The carry through was just to keep the full record, because that was initially the first memo, and then we followed through. The council amended it second reading. You are correct. You are voting on the second, on the bottom, one at the bottom of the page of the memo, which is reiterated in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
You done, Mr. Wilson? Thank you, sir. Mr. Doherty?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with how it's written. I'd like to, I fully support it. And, you know, as some people mentioned earlier, this is part of a bigger issue we have. And I mentioned this at the last meeting. Shatter Avenue is our blighted area. Having people there will help change, will buck that trend. I mean, nobody really mentions it, but the only people who hang out in Shatter at the moment are homeless. That's it. And if we do have businesses that are going on later than 5 o'clock at night, there's life there, there's vibrancy there, there's people there. You know, maybe it won't be such a, you know, people avoid it now. Like my wife avoids it. She doesn't like driving down there because she's afraid of, like, you know, she breaks down, what's going to happen. So I think it's our duty to make sure that it was done. The first street was blighted back in '94. That's turned around. We turned around the south area of the beach. This is something we can focus on by amending land codes to make sure that the wrong type of businesses don't come in and take us back to the problem times. You know, like I said, I think it's our duty. I'm happy with this. It's been quite painful, I know, for the applicants. But it was a multifaceted thing because it wasn't really your application, it was the land code. But, you know, these guys have really shown some remarkable consideration for the neighbors. I fully believe that they're going to do what they're saying they're going to do. We're not gambling here. They're the ones that are gambling with their money. But they are going to improve that area. That's a fact. And as Mr. I think Willie said, Mr. McLaren, you know, we need something there. We need that area, you know, vibrant again. So this will start it. So I fully support the ordinance change, and I fully support the guy's business venture. I know I'm not voting on that, but you know, good luck, guys. Like it.
Ms. Goldman, you have a quick revisit?
Well, I don't want to totally discount what Ms. Dumont was bringing up. It's just, there was a lot of information, and I appreciate all the research that you did. And I'd like to have a little bit of clarification on some of the information that you provided us, because you mentioned 15,000 barrels of beer, whereas our definition was saying 8,000 barrels. So I'm not sure why you were proposing that it would be changed to 15,000.
15,000 is just what the Brewers Association considers to be a microbrewery. Our definition is what we consider to be a microbrewery. So if we were going to allow sales of beer other than what's brewed on premises, we would limit it to only microbreweries with annual output of less than 15,000 barrels.
Oh,
So like Intuition would be, they would be able to have Intuition on tap and things such as that.
so you were actually talking about the breweries that are going to be on tap.
Yes.
Would be
Remember,
limited to
what they're
15,000.
asking is, and this is what we got, the tasting room was that they could only sell what they brew on premises. Their problem with that was, if they do that, their business model falls apart, so that we amended it to be beer and wine, so this way they could have other microbreweries on their premises, and they could sell that. The problem ends up being that we only put beer and wine, and we didn't restrict the beer. So you could have PBR on tap, and then that goes back to Keith's point. Yeah, there are people, you know, you want more people on Cheddar Ave, but you want the people who are only looking for the $1 PBR drafts. Is that what you're looking for on Cheddar Ave? I don't think that that was ever our concept. Our concept, we're not voting on their business, our concept was for kind of a higher upper scale microbrewery. And by the amendment that I proposed would force it, and I'm not worried about their business, but any other business that wants to open in that zone and call themselves a microbrewery would be under those same restrictions. So it's not their business I'd be worried about. It would be somebody coming in, and I guess it'd be a microbrewery in name only. That doesn't come out as good as mine. A microbrewery in name only, but that just, you know, they have some kind of a still, somehow they're brewing a small amount of beer, but they're getting the main dollars out of PBR and Bud Light and less expensive beer, which draws a different crowd than what we are envisioning out here. That was the purpose of the narrowing of my definition. I know, it was a lot of information.
Right, right. Well, and so with your explanation, I like where you're going with it. And I don't know if you'd be willing to make the motion again. I'd be willing to second it.
You can make your motion.
I make a motion to amend the motion to change the word tasting room and the definition of microbrewery to tap room, and then change the definition of tap room to include, after the word beer, brewed by microbreweries that produce less than 15,000 barrels of beer annually, comma, and wine on site.
Got a motion on the floor, do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, any discussion from council?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Doherty?
There's a few things, yeah, the dollar PBRs, when you open that bar, you'll well get a lot of homeless people on it, because that's a good price. But I don't see our whole population drinking in bars or using buying their liquor. They're chief of the ABC and going to their parks and beaches. First of all, we can't force alcohol regulations as a city. So, how would we inspect their beer that was being brought in from another microbrewery? I mean, that's a bit convoluted, and it's outside our remit. The thing is as well, there's some craft beers that sell more than 15,000 units, but are still craft beer. So, I get what you're saying, but I think what we did last meeting, where we limited the size of the building, to your point, if somebody brews some home brew in a bathtub and says that's their microbrewery, and then has their tasting room, it doesn't make any sense because they can only use 25% of that leased area as that consumption. So they might be crazy and they might want to do that, but I mean, they're not going to stay in business much for a very long time, but when they're only able to use 25% of the property. I just think that, I get what you're saying, I do understand, and I agree with your point that we don't want rogue businesses that we have here in the central business district. And changing codes is the right direction to actually buck in this trend, but that's a different matter. But when we talk about the beer volumes, craft beers become popular and then they get over that limit. Other beers don't reach that limit because they're not good. But it's not up to us to decide that. And they're not going to be selling stuff. I doubt they're going to be selling dollar beers, first of all, but I don't know any microbrewery in Green Room or Engine or whatever sell it. They take pride in craft beer. They take pride in other people's beer because they like to talk smack about it, and that's what they bring it in. So yeah, I think this definition covers it enough without, I just know there's a lot of state regulation with liquor and beer. I just add more to it. First of all, I think it's unenforceable. Second of all, I think it's too much of a pigeonhole for a microbrewery. So,
Thank you, sir.
you know what I'm saying?
Ms. Golding, is your comment relative to the amendment motion?
Yes,
Okay.
well, what I like about her amendment is, in doing some of my research, it started to feel like tasting room was not really it's not really what we're thinking. It's really just tasting what has been brewed, whereas tap room, when she started talking about tap room, that sounds more like what we're willing to be okay with, that, you can have the beer that they're brewing, but also sell other microbreweries beer, because you're putting other beers on tap. So to me, once I understood the intricacies of her motion, tap room makes more sense to me. And so that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Dumont.
I just want to go back to the city council meeting on 12/3 with regard to Keith's argument that you're limiting this applicant, which we're not voting on them, but would satisfy both the request of the applicant and the concerns of the city. There are, what they said, and this is a quote, our brewing concept is a very small-scale brewing site, and our goal is to work with other limited edition type brewers in town and create these one-off brands of creative brewing concepts, and they will be able to taste them in the tap room. That is very specific, and that's what we were originally thinking about when we came up with tasting room, which ends up having to be tap room. But they're thinking very small, and if that's what we're thinking about allowing in that CS district, I could see easily putting the limit of 15,000 annual sales. That is what Craft Brewers considers a small craft brewery, the Craft Brewers Association.
They would have to move if they went above that. There's not enough space to brew that more than 15,000.
Intuition only brews 10,000, and they're huge. That's why I contacted Ben to find out, to get a concept of
That's funny,
what
because
that
he told the
would
business
be.
journal like that 85,000, so I don't know what he was, maybe he was talking about one specific brand, but I know he did, because they're expanding, and they have expanded, and they haven't expanded because their beer's no good, they've expanded because they're making a lot of it. But this is just, it's a moot point. If, so, I don't think that they're wanting to brew one-offs. I mean, if you're in the brewing business and you make a decent beer and people start liking it, it's going to become popular and you're going to sell it. I mean, let's be realistic. So if their business takes off and they grow bigger than their 6,800 square feet, is that what you have? 6,800, that's including offices and their print area. They're physically not going to be able to do that. So they would have to move.
Nor would we want them to, because we don't want a big bar, we don't want
It's not a bar.
exactly, it's a magazine publishing establishment. It's not a,
No, we're talking
it's not a
about the
tap
microbrewery.
room with a magazine on the side.
We're talking about the microbrewery. And I'm saying if the microbrewery, if their demand exceeds their production, they're going to have to move. They can't fit there. So there's craft beers like Highlight, comes from Tampa, which you mentioned. I know they sell more than 15,000 barrels, but they're still craft beer.
That's why the definition's not craft beer, it's by the annual output.
What do I mean?
15,000 barrels annually. If you use craft beer, then you can include things like Yingling, Boston Beer Company, Sam Adams. If you use the term craft beer, that's why you can't use the term craft beer. You have to go by annual output, which limits the size of the brewery, which was more along the concept that they put forth to us, and that's how I was thinking when I approved all those other meetings.
But was the whole debate then about the impact on the community as opposed to how much beer these guys can brew? Because it seems like that's where we've kind of divulged into this. And, you know, this is why we have the percentage of their square footage. They can only fit so many people in there, there can only be so many cars there. Which was, I think, the biggest, once we got over the nightclub and the liquor stuff, I think that was the biggest point of contention. And now we're talking about their beer production.
Okay.
Am I getting you right?
I'm gonna take control of the floor. We've got a motion on the floor. We've had some discussion. The motion put forward by Mr. Mott has a second. I'm gonna terminate discussion because we're kind of going in circles. Madam Clerk, we need a roll call, please, for the amendment.
Councilmember Vogelsang,
No.
Councilmember Doherty,
No.
Councilmember Dumont,
Yes.
Councilmember Golding,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman. Councilmember Nichols,
No.
Mayor Latham.
Yes, motion's defeated, 4-3. So we're going back to, it looks like we're pretty much through all the discussion on the original motion. Is there anybody else that has additional discussion on the original motion? Okay. Ms. Golden?
I'm still liking the tap room definition versus tasting room, just because, I mean, if we don't include the limitation on the breweries, the amount that the microbreweries they sell, you know, I
I
mean.
might call it a tap room if somebody wants to make that motion,
You wanna
change
make
it
that?
to
Yeah, it's
tap
just
room.
semantics. I mean,
That's-
it's the
that's-
same.
It's not even gonna call it a tap room on their sign, so it really doesn't matter, but if changing it to a tap room seems like a more appropriate term, I'm all for that. So if you wanna make the motion, I'll happily second it. To just change tasting room to tap room.
Correct. My motion would be that we change tasting room to tap room.
And I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second, any discussion? Mr. Nichols?
Will we have to have another reading? Do they have to come back, do they have to come back for this, or if we make that change?
Before the city attorney speaks, might have a minute, this was fully anticipated. If all we're doing is changing the phraseology from tasting room to tap room, the definition was vetted at one council meeting, amended at a second reading, that would not require a trip back to the planning commission and back to council for further reading. It's basically all here in a minute.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Moore.
The city attorney disagrees.
Yes, the city attorney's position is that, my only concern with that, I agree, this has been vetted in the public, quite a bit. But the ordinance, we are changing the short term of the ordinance from a tasting room to tap room. The safest way would be to set it over for another hearing, and that way you're crystal clear. You're free to accept or reject that recommendation. That's the one thing the courts look at, were this to be, this change to be attacked in a court process, the very first thing the court looks at is, did we afford due process? And the safest way would be to hold it over for another hearing. So,
Ms. Cullen, do you want to withdraw your motion? Mr. Boatswain, do you want to withdraw your second?
I'll withdraw my second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second on the floor? And we do not have a second. Motion is denied. Now we're back to the original motion. We've heard from Mr. Bowman, Mr. Mott, Mr. Boatswain, Mr. Doherty. Anybody else want to comment? I'm going to ask Mr. Wallace to come up to the podium. This is a letter that presumably everybody got. But I just want to ask you outright.
I did not.
Pardon me?
I did not receive that letter.
Okay. I'll pass this back. This is in public record. It was sent to my email address, and I'll make sure the clerk gives everybody a copy. You list on here, third, fourth page, your findings below. One of your comments is, your goal is to be an influential magnet that converts the blighted, homeless-ridden Shutter Avenue into a safer, family-friendly environment that I hope we all want for the future of Jacksonville Beach. How are you going to do that?
By moving our business there, by pumping over $500,000 into the building alone, to providing jobs, to creating our tap room where we're going to bring the community in. And this is not just a brewery, we're doing our craft beer magazine, which is also going to help elevate the Northeast Florida craft beer culture. And like you know, with our Void magazine and Edible magazine, we use the place as a sounding board to create ideas that are going to better the community. We've had meetings about special events. Charlie, you and I invited me to lunch, and we talked about ideas and ways to improve what we're doing here in Jacksonville Beach. So all of those things, not only financial, but outside of that, just us caring and being an outreach center, a creative spot where inviting people in. Things we do at our office now, but doing it on a regular basis. So all of those things would aid to that.
Okay, thank you, sir. We're counting on you to do the right thing. And,
Trust in the right person.
you know, I've made very clear statements that I've been really concerned about us stepping the wrong way. And as we get ready to vote on this, I want you to know I'll be watching, okay?
Welcome to watch.
Thank you, sir. Bill, I got a question for you, Bill. Bill?
Yes, sir. Right in the line.
Man, we need to get you a stenographer over there. What's the difference between this and 2COP?
The difference between,
Well, we're authorizing if we agree to.
they may need that license type to do it, but they're still also governed by our local definition.
Is there anything, so our local definition, if we agree that midnight is only on Fridays and Saturdays, that's irrevocable, correct?
Yes, sir.
Unless it's changed.
And that's
by this
enforceable.
board.
That is enforceable as well. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other lights on the board. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please, for the final motion?
Councilmember Doherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Dumont.
No?
Councilmember Goldie.
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman. Councilmember Nichols.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogelsang.
Yes.
Mayor Latham.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, our meeting is concluded. Have a good night.